back. What's this, episode 8?
It is episode 8. Comes thick and fast now. The twice a week does make a massive difference, you know what I think?
Mate, it's needed as well because
Yeah.
so much is going on.
Yeah.
This is the full-time whistle edition.
I know. Another late night.
It is another late night. Don't worry, I won't keep you up too long. I will try and not waffle on too much this week. I'm genuinely fuming about what I've just watched. So I was going to start this and obviously speak about Liverpool. But right at the end of the game there, I haven't even seen it properly because I've almost just stopped watching it. I think it's Phil Foden has gone down and in the process it's hit his arm. Mahrez has gone and scored and everyone celebrated, all cool, whatever, 5-0, completely embarrassing. And then they go back, VAR has managed to find this. And I'm sure everyone that's listening or watching this will have seen what's happened in the Spurs game earlier on, accompanied by the fact with what's happened with Mikel Antonio the night before. It's like...
It's been a bad weekend, a bad couple of days.
Bad midweek.
Midweek.
You know how you just you wanted football back so much, and I'm not criticising, obviously it coming back or anything like that, but you almost airbrush this, how bad VAR actually is, because you almost condense it and be like, oh, do you know what? It's not actually that bad. It doesn't annoy you that much. I don't support any of these teams. It has no, impact on my life whatsoever. But, the Lucas Moura one earlier, I just can't believe it. Because, to be fair to them, I think they haven't given it for when, I think it's Egan kicks the ball against him. I think it's when he's going down, it touches his arm, and then it's obviously cleared against him. He slightly brushes his hand. But the thing with that is obviously they've completely outweighed this law, because if it touches your arm at all in the build-up to any goal, it's disallowed. But if that happens at the other end for a penalty, it's not a penalty necessarily, unless there's intent. Yeah. So I know a lot of people on Twitter have obviously been saying, look, it's about the law, don't complain with the officials, but it's rubbish. It's a minute touch on the arm, and I think there's got to be common sense.
And also, what was the game the other day? I remember speaking to you about it, where it did hit someone's arm in the build-up to a goal, an attacking player, and it wasn't given.
Yeah. I think that would be the Davison Sanchez against West Ham.
Yeah.
I think it just quickly, that happened at the beginning of the season for Isaac Hayden. Newcastle benefited against Watford.
And this is the problem. It's I am a massive fan of VAR, and I think it will improve the game. But at the moment, things like that. I texted you straight away because I didn't watch the Spurs game. I texted you, I could not believe it. I could not believe it. I was like, what have I just seen? The geezer, he's not even looking at the ball. He's just kicked it against him. I could not believe it. And I think it's that thing, isn't it? It's that interpretation of the law. And I think that's where you're absolutely right. There needs to be some common sense. And that's why I think that's my one problem with VAR is what I've never understood is why the referee doesn't go and look at it. It makes so much more sense because he's seen it there in real time. He can interpret that in a different way than someone just watching it on a screen can.
Well, exactly. And especially that I think it was Michael Oliver. It may have actually been a Crystal Palace game in the FA Cup, but he certainly went over to the screen. And this was back in January or early February. And there was this big demand for more referees to do that. And then the PGMOL came out and were like, yeah, we're going to do this more. We're encouraging referees to do it. But they haven't done it. And, you're right. It doesn't make... It's complete nonsense. I genuinely have written down the most smallest notes. And I just had VAR written there as a slight thing to just touch on. But that right at the end of the game there, because, 4-0, 5-0, it's still disgraceful from Liverpool this evening. But I still think, 5-0... It's quite a daunting number, isn't it? That big number 5 up against the scoreboard.
Yeah.
I don't want to. VAR has been done to death. It is what it is. It's going to need a lot of improvements ahead of next season. I don't think we'll actually get them. I think what they'll do is they'll slightly change the law, maybe to make things a little bit clearer. I think they're actually going to change where they decide where the arm is. Which I don't think helps because at the moment it's the whole of this. But they're going to cut it off here. But it's like, that's different for every player. It's different, and it just changes the point of contact.
And that's the thing.
Obviously, that section would have been terrible if you're listening to this podcast. But I mean, that's more of a reason to watch it on YouTube. But seriously, to get stuck into Liverpool, on commentary, Gary Neville said they're entitled to have an off day. I was genuinely shocked to hear that from a serial winner in Gary Neville, who has won everything that you can win apart from the World Cup. I can maybe understand Jamie Carragher letting off his old team, and let's be honest, he's won stuff in his career, never won the Premier League. But for Gary Neville to basically say that was acceptable from Liverpool, Roy Keane in the build-up was like, look, I'm next to this warm-up. They are bang up for this. You can say what you like, that they'll be on the beach, whatnot. They're not. And you would see from Klopp's reaction every time a goal was going in.
This is the thing, yeah. And I mean, I feel like with Gary Neville there, obviously I watched it on my Danish TV, if anyone didn't know. But I think he's probably saying that to kind of be cautious and not sound bitter. Because I just feel like, I was going to, it was really bad. And I don't think that the majority of Liverpool fans will care that much. But to those players, and to Klopp especially, I think, to lose like that to Guardiola, that will hurt him regardless of anything else. Just a bit of ego there in terms of that will hurt him for sure. And yeah, I mean, it's strange. And at the end of the day, yes, it doesn't matter. But, to say they're entitled, it's like, if anything, this is the game where you don't want to be entitled and you want to prove that you are that much better. And it's like, yes, okay, they're 20 whatever points clear, but they've just done you 4-0 like that. So that will hurt them, and it should hurt them. And I think it is a weird thing to say, but at the same time, I think he's probably erring on the side of caution to not just sound bitter.
Yeah, I get that. But at the same time, this game 100% was being, set up from the Man City camp as, I think they almost view this as like a second season within a season, because they were always going to come back and it was going to be impossible, although not mathematically, to knock Liverpool off their perch. It was never going to happen. So they can see this as 9 games left, whatever it was, as their kind of set up, because they kind of knew by then, I think when we started the Champions League be happening in August. So it's kind of one big build up for that. But even so, it's a build up for next season. That's what it is basically. And you're right, Liverpool, the only game that they've got to care about, it doesn't matter if they're playing Arsenal, who are, 9th, or Leicester in 3rd, or Chelsea in 4th. This was the one game that mattered. And it came at the best time. You had a week. That's it. You had a week. You've won the league, okay? You've, fair play to them, as we said last week. They showed how good they are, the way they beat Crystal Palace. But then you look back at it a week later and you're like, well, okay, they dispatched a mid-table team really comfortably. I'd expect my champions to do that. Yeah. But today, when you're going away to the top team, a team that have looked incredible since they've come back during this Project Restart period, it just really frustrates me, because that's your opportunity. And you know what? And I know you didn't watch the entirety of the game, but in the first 20 minutes, Salah hits the post. I think he should go across goal, but it was even. It wasn't even like Liverpool were out of this and they were being outplayed. They made countless mistakes moving on from that period, but especially the first 20 minutes they were in it. And what I'm trying to get at is I just thought Man City were excellent. And I was genuinely so impressed with them. And we've spoken a lot about next season. And I'm now beginning to think they, I feel right now that they're going to get that Champions League ban down to a year. And it will be the best thing that could happen to them, because it's a year to reset. It's a year to play Saturday, Tuesday, and Saturday, really, unless you've got a midweek game. You're not really going to have that. But it's time on the training field with his players, and that's all he'll want.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, and I think that time will be, something that he relishes, and it is going to be exciting next season. And I mean, you think about this period where Guardiola usually has that set period at a club, and you'd thought maybe this is it now. Maybe they'll start to kind of go in a different direction, but I don't think he will, because I think he just wants to prove himself again and again and again. So he wants to now that Liverpool have won it, and they've obviously been brilliant. He wants to be better than that. And I think tonight was the first step in that. And he'll be sitting there thinking, right, yeah, let's do this again, because he knows he is the best manager, no doubt. And he has the best players. He has the best squad. And, for some reason, they obviously just weren't as good as Liverpool this season. And he'll want to go again for sure, I think. And I agree. I think if they get that year ban, they'll have a whole squad that their dispatch week in, week out. It'll be probably unstoppable.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what it comes down to, isn't it? Between these two managers, it's going to be an ego thing. And, I think Klopp's basically made it well known that when he's signed this contract extension until 2024, he is very likely to leave at the end of that. So I think Guardiola could almost use that as a gauge of, I could need to kind of do better than him by that period to show that I'm the better manager. But looking at next season, the only thing that matters for Manchester City is keeping hold of Kevin De Bruyne, because he is on a different level right now. And, so well.
I mean, he's 3 assists off Henry's record, which...
Yeah, well, I don't know you got this on the commentary, but basically, De Bruyne's fuming that he keeps on getting assists taken away from him because there's like a deflection or something happens. And then he set up what would have been Sterling's...
And then it was an own goal, yeah.
And then it's an own goal, so you won't get the assist for that?
Yeah.
Absolutely fuming.
I mean, he is just...
Oh, he's a joke.
He is just a different level of good. I mean, just the best player in the Premier League by a mile.
At the moment, yeah, for sure. He certainly is. But for me, what was very interesting for City is I kind of felt like they changed how they play a little bit tonight, because they obviously had the back four, but they had Rodri and Gundogan sitting as a two together. Normally, it's just one or the other, mainly Rodri. But it allowed Kyle Walker and Mendy to kind of push up. So you almost got two centre-backs, but then with the right and the left back, you've actually got a four across there. And I remember when he first came, Guardiola, with Mendy, that's how they were playing. Sometimes actually with a five at the back, using them as wing backs. Because Mendy, in the first half, he does have a lovely ball in. He struggled so much with injury. I think he had a bit of a poor time last week against Chelsea. But he has got this wonderful ability to put the ball, in that old corridor of uncertainty. But that kind of base allows De Bruyne to have this free roll, and the amount of times he was getting the ball on the half turn and just having, the freedom of the pitch to play lovely balls in behind for the wingers. But the wingers were the most interesting thing, because it was Sterling and Foden, but they were almost... It created like a box in the midfield, because they're almost like attacking midfielders, but then drift out to the wing and then allow Jesus to do the running up front. It just felt like that was the kind of blueprint team for next season. It looked like a trial game for me.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that, because, I mean, he tried the false nine again kind of throughout the game, and I think he did it the other day as well. And, it's interesting to see, because obviously that was so successful at Barcelona, and that's kind of his blueprint in a way. And it is true. I mean, and the way they just interchange, Foden will go up front, then De Bruyne is wide, and then the movement is just ridiculous. And when you've got those two players who are just going to sit in front of the back two or whatever it is, and, it allows them to do that because they are of that quality. And it didn't even really look like they weren't really too open either at the same time. Especially Liverpool, who are a really great counter-attacking team, and they can hit you on the break fast and wide. They still didn't look like they were overrun. So
they have players everywhere.
Yeah,
and for me as well, it's hats off to Pep Guardiola, because obviously there's been so much chat about Phil Foden for such a long time now, but I think I've mentioned this in one of our earlier episodes. I just think that he is managing him down to a T. And I'd go as far to say is that he knew for a long time when David Silva was planning to leave the club, and that was well within his idea of when to develop Foden. And, this is, I think I've said before, but on a slight tangent, you're seeing players like Matty Longstaff who want to leave Newcastle and, get more money elsewhere. This is a manager who genuinely is invested in the player. And we've said before, told the media just how good he was, and then he's developing at his own pace. And tonight, I think Micah Richards said it in the punditry. this guy, it's not for the future now. He's ready for now. And as a English supporter, I think it's almost a blessing that this summer's Euros has been postponed.
Yeah,
Phil Foden the whole season playing Manchester City's first team next year. It's a mouth-watering prospect, really.
for sure. And there's a number of players as well who will be looking at it the same way. I think it's probably one of the more open England squads, in terms of depth, where there's a lot of players who are younger on the brink of the England squad, and they'll all be looking at it and thinking, players like, maybe not Declan Rice is a great example, but as someone who has played and wants obviously a starting role, to have a full year now of playing in the first team like Phil Foden, I mean, yeah, it's frightening and it's really exciting as well. And I think that, he has managed him perfectly, and, that's not a shock to me because, I think he is one of the greatest managers ever. But
no, he is for sure. And to be honest, another player who's going to benefit from an extra year of development is Mason Greenwood. And we've got an interview coming up at the end of this podcast that we recorded a little bit earlier with Steve from Tap In Football. And it's really good to chat about him, just about players like Greenwood, who I say in the interview, I kind of forget about him sometimes.
Yeah.
He's a top quality young player, and he is a right winger to me because, I like him coming in with his left foot, but he's also a number 9. And I feel as though can play anywhere across the front three. So it is genuinely exciting. But, moving on to the other games, and this big question that I want to ask you, because I know that it's beginning to kind of take its toll. There was far too many games at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday for everyone to keep up with them. And I know that we watched our separate teams.
Yeah.
Big question, and I'm sure everyone wants to know this. Did you watch Crystal Palace against Burnley?
Well, I can't say I did. But I did hear that it was nearly the 0-0 game we all expected, but Burnley did manage to come away with the win.
They did. I mean, that was the one that we were saying, this will really sum up the appetite for the Premier League. I obviously
did you watch it? No,
of course. But no, it was on. It was on. I was up to other stuff as well. But my parents were actually round, and even my mum commented on their crowd effects. She was like, "What is this? It's so bad." So at least I know I'm justified in my hatred for.
Well, there you go. It's not just you.
My mum agreed with me, and that's all that matters. But yes, like I said, we will have Steve from the Tap In Football podcast on later on, so we'll focus in Manchester United in a bit more detail there. But just to gloss over, that was Tuesday night's result. They obviously won 3-0 away at Manchester United. Another VAR thing, but this time where it wasn't actually used. Firstly, the ball went out of play in the build-up to Bruno Fernandes's goal, but apparently too much time had elapsed. I mean, you make it up as you go along, I guess. When you're sitting in those trucks, I think, because it's from the same attack, then surely it leads to the goal.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion. And then you would have liked to maybe have seen the lines to see if Luke Shaw was offside, but I guess we'll never know. But to be fair, it's one of those things where it's kind of incidental because the better team definitely won. But for Brighton, I mean, it's a disappointing defeat, but they're on 33 points and they're still 6 points clear of the relegation zone.
Yeah.
I just found it very interesting that, Graham Potter this is, I still don't think that he knows his best team because he's obviously, they cancelled the loan of Alexis McAllister back in January. Got him back. He's obviously an Argentina international. And he played just off Aaron Connolly, dropping more pay. And I was like, well, they're all very similar players, very diminutive. McAllister's certainly more of a midfielder. But it's just funny because you've got someone like Glenn Murray obviously not playing and was guaranteed goals for your team last year. I'm just wondering because they've only won 7 games this season, Brighton, which is one of the lowest in the league. I think we both think they're going to stay up, but do you kind of feel as though they're the team that's crying out for a proper striker and almost for Potter kind of to define exactly how he wants to play off the back of him? Because even though Mopé's nimble when he moves around, I kind of feel like a bigger striker might work better for them.
For sure, I think. It's that kind of security, you know what I mean, where you're in a team, and I think teams like Bournemouth maybe have had it over the years with kind of like players like Callum Wilson or things like that who have always kind of scored you the goals that you need. And Brighton, they don't really have that. They haven't got that player who's going to get you 10 goals and that be the difference, you know. And I think that definitely would be a big step for them if they could secure that. And like you said, I do think they will stay up because the teams below them are much worse at this moment in time. So yeah, I'd agree.
Well, they are much worse, and we'll get on to Bournemouth in a bit because, you know, even as a Newcastle fan, I don't still quite know what happened there. But just to briefly look at the Wednesday games and touch on the one that I haven't got too much to say on is Arsenal and their 4-0 win over Norwich. I think we all know that Norwich are pretty much down now. They've had a really, really terrible restart. I think, you know, even coming back into it, I don't think they could have possibly imagined it would go this badly. But for Arsenal, I think we said a couple of weeks ago when they played Man City, which feels like an age ago now, but that's obviously when it all restarted. They were a bit unlucky that night, obviously with the couple of injuries that they picked up. And then those players were, well, Mari was out for the rest of the season. Xhaka has actually come back and scored in this game. But Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, you know, on fire. He's set more records for the amount of goals that he's surpassed in this period. Sheffield United have obviously won today. They've beaten Spurs, but Arsenal just a point behind them on 46, and they're in 8th. We speak about this again with the guests coming on. I think 6 points might just be too much of a breach into 5th, and it'd be 8 points into the Champions League. But do you think it's more important for Arsenal this season to get in the Europa League, or do you think it might be better for a type of Manchester City season where they're not in playing European football?
Yeah, I think we've touched on this before where, you know, with the Tottenham and Arsenal thing, I think that it could definitely be beneficial. You know, they're still in that transition phase and they're still trying to figure it out and they need to sign a couple of players. And I think more than anything, Norwich were incredibly poor again yesterday, like mistakes after mistakes, which cost them goals. And you look at Arsenal's next 5 fixtures and they're all very difficult games. I mean, they got Wolves, Leicester, Tottenham, Liverpool and Man City. So, you know, you wonder how many points they're going to get out of that compared to teams like Manchester United who have very, very winnable games. So I think it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And of course, they'll probably want to get into Europe. I mean, who wouldn't? But I think it wouldn't be the end of the world.
No, I like, you know, we have spoken, you're right. But I just think, especially as a new coach in Arteta, a new manager, obviously hasn't had a full season there yet. It's always difficult when you join midway through a season. I think he'd really benefit from the similar thing to Guardiola, of having that period of time where you can get a proper rest for your players and to, you know, try and develop your style of play as well. But obviously for Arsenal and for Tottenham, it's probably important, like you say, for them to get into Europe, any type of European competition, purely for the finances involved. But that is the team that I really want to get stuck into. And I just going to leave this open because Spurs are a point behind Arsenal, back in 9th, level on points with Burnley, a point ahead of Everton, and just 3 points ahead of Crystal Palace and Newcastle. I mean, if I told you that Maurizio Pochettino was on £6 million a year and Jose Mourinho came in on £15 million a year, I asked you this right at the beginning of this podcast, but do you now change your mind and think this has been an unmitigated disaster for Daniel Levy?
Yeah, I mean, well, my answer at the time was time will tell, wasn't it? So, I mean, at the moment,
too much
time is not telling a lot, as much as not much time has passed. But it is always going to be difficult. I mean, you know, I really liked Pochettino. I liked what he was about and I liked what he was doing there. And Mourinho is a very, very different manager, you know, to him. So, you know, it's hard to say how I feel about it really, because I do think that some more time needs to pass. I do think that this hasn't been obviously a normal season now. I think he will have a bit more time, especially because of the money. I don't think they'll be in any rush to get rid of him. So I think he will have time to rectify it, and it will be interesting to see what improvements they can make over the summer.
Yeah, well, I think that's a massive point, because they have put so much money into this deal. Then, yeah, you're right. That Spurs probably they spent a lot of money sacking Maurizio Pochettino. It's only fairly recently that he actually was officially sacked and taken off gardening leave. And
Yeah.
everyone knows how much money's gone into the stadium and the financing model that's behind it. This American style, NFL style thing to basically not what happened to Arsenal happened to Spurs, where you've got to sell your best players every year.
Yeah.
But there's can be all this talk about Tanguy Ndombele, and he came off the bench today, and I just felt a bit sorry for him because his big money move from Lyon in the summer. There's been fitness issues. Mourinho's criticised his work ethic. Obviously got pictured during lockdown going out training with Aurier. So there's problems there, even though he's probably just trying to prove something to his manager. Gets on the ball, and it's a simple pass out to Ben Davies, and he just overhits it, puts so much power on it, and it just skids out. And then, gives the ball away a couple more times, and you can just see the pressure. And that's what I'm getting at, is the whole team just look under so much pressure. The goals that they've conceded today against Sheffield United, and this is a Sheffield United team, which obviously I've been criticising, and rightly so, because this is Sheffield United at their best. You will watch that game today, and you'll not come away from it and be like, "Oh, he was unbelievable today," because every single one of their players played well, and that's what they have to do. They're a collective team, and you look at the players on that pitch. Sheffield United were missing Jack O'Connell still. They're missing John Fleck, one of their most important players, and also John Lundstram, who's obviously fantasy football dream. He gets loads of points. I don't play it, but I know a lot of people do. But he's out as well. And this was kind of the game where Sander Berg, or Berger, however, depending on which commentator you listen to, how he pronounces it, came to life, scored a goal, got at least one assist. But they're just hard working, and you're not seeing that from a Jose Mourinho team, which I would say he has been the manager when I've been growing up as like not just the main guy, but like he was being that constant manager throughout, always at the best teams when you're growing up. Even when he went to Inter Milan, you're still watching him on Champions League nights and winning the Champions League, Diego Milito scoring, for example. Those teams always had desire. They always had passion, and they always had organisation. And that's just the basic things that are lacking from Spurs right now.
I think it's a reflection on Mourinho. I think that is him as a person now. I don't think he isn't that same manager. Football isn't like it was, and I just think he hasn't really been able to adapt and to change, and I don't think he seems very bothered to do that. He seems rather stuck in his ways, and I think you could probably take a lot from what you're seeing now at Manchester United when he was there. There isn't that kind of freedom. People are a little bit on edge. It doesn't quite seem right, if you know what I mean. There's that kind of, you don't get a good feeling about it. And I can't imagine what it's like in the dressing room. But you're looking at what happened at Man United, seeing kind of where they were at. And now you're looking at Tottenham, and they seem to be going through that same kind of thing. And I just wonder whether actually it's just him and people don't enjoy working for him anymore. And he's not that same person that you probably thought, oh, Jose Mourinho is the manager, this is going to be great. You're probably not thinking that anymore. And I wonder if that's a reflection on how it is and how they're playing because of it.
Well, I saw Miguel Delaney, works for the Independent, tweet earlier saying that he thinks that Jose is club football's just kind of developed too much for his managerial style. But what would you say to him being an international manager, where you can obviously pick up your players every couple of months, but you can implement ideas and try different things with them? Do you think that's probably more likely?
His style is probably more like that because I think he now, where he was kind of, say before Real Madrid and things, obviously he had the players that are different level to what he's working with now, but there was that long-term strategy. You knew what they were about. I think now, because of that kind of, he's been a bit left behind in that kind of way that it's developed. He has that ability maybe to impact things quite short term. So when he comes in, and I think, that would suit a tournament where you're only there for a month and you've got a month to work with them before, and you've got that short time to really kind of more of a motivational thing, and kind of everyone thinks, oh, he's Jose Mourinho, because of course he is a great manager. He has been for many years, and he is a big personality. And I do agree with that. I think that's probably maybe his next move. Who knows?
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think, going forward, it probably would suit him a little bit more. But, just to round off the midweek game that doesn't involve either of our sides, because I'm genuinely fascinated to basically find out how Everton played, because I know Leicester have been struggling, but they gave you a bit of a battering despite the scoreline. But
Yeah.
one team that did help was Chelsea, because they slipped up at the London Stadium unexpectedly, really, especially with the way that West Ham have been playing. But, it's always difficult, those London derbies. I've just got to say, fair play to West Ham, especially because of the VAR incident when Souček's goal was chalked off because Mikel Artonio was lying down on the floor, basically. But to come back from that, and they then went a goal behind, and they went 2-1 up, and then pegged back to 2-2, and to still go and win it. I just thought that was really, just excellent, resilience, basically. But they're basically the only team that's won down there since football's begun. Since football's restarted. And, do you think that they're going to be the team to kind of not pull away now, but certainly end up in a Brighton or Newcastle position of safety?
I mean, that's what we originally thought, wasn't it? I mean, we looked at their squad and, they're the ones who have that quality to do that. And I think on Chelsea quickly, I think, you say it was rather unexpected, but then, I think over the last 2 games that they've played, we both sat here and thought they looked a bit tired and somehow they'd managed to dig out a result and things. And I think now it's caught up with them and, they had a bit of a kind of the fatigue showed. And they were unlucky. And I think West Ham were unlucky with the goal. And then obviously it's hard because, it's quite easy to feel like things are just going against you when you're in that situation and you're down the bottom of the league and you need those points. But yeah, I think they'll be okay now. I'm not exactly sure what their run-in's like, but I think Bournemouth obviously they don't seem to want to be involved anymore. So they're kind of just given up, and that's that. Which we kind of predicted at the beginning as well. We both said that they'd be alongside Norwich. So I think any team who's going to pick up points, especially against Chelsea, where you're not looking at it as a game that you must win, I think any team who can do that stands a really good chance of staying up.
Yeah, well, I've got West Ham's running now. It's it's away to Newcastle, at home to Burnley, away to Norwich, at home to Watford, away to United, and at home to Villa. So it's one of those, like I was looking at Newcastle originally, literally constant 6-pointers.
Yeah.
But that is the kind of win to set a catalyst really for your chance to survive. And fair play to them, like I said. And it was interesting because it's hard to roll back the years so far to remember a typical David Moyes performance. But to be fair, it's as close as you've got probably in the last 15 years, simply because there was so much resilience on show. But genuine togetherness, and it's so important at this time of the year. We've criticised Aston Villa. I mean, obviously, because the fixture list is a bit skewed because of the FA Cup. Villa's midweek game was technically the one against Wolves they played last Saturday. They haven't played this midweek. But we obviously both commented on the fact that it almost felt like Dean Smith was bowing to crowd and fan pressure to play Davis and Samatta up front. Obviously, it's narrow diamond, and it's much more encouraging when you're West Ham and you've got everyone seemingly pulling in the same direction. But yeah, it was a bit of a let-off for Chelsea. You're right in the sense they've had obviously massive win against Leicester in the Cup, but obviously beating City in the league, they would have exerted quite a lot of energy to be able to do that. Yeah. But then it comes down to Leicester, and they just keep on falling. I don't quite know when it's going to stop. We obviously had Jamie Thorpe on last week from the First for LCFC podcast, and we were still fairly confident for them despite the form. But, I mean, you went into a 2-goal lead quite early on, didn't you, on Wednesday afternoon?
It was lovely, yeah. I mean, you don't often get that with Everton, but obviously they didn't make it easy in the end. But with Leicester, they dominated most of the game, and it was the classic Ancelotti where we went 2-0 up, and I thought, we're playing quite open here, but it was only 15 minutes in, and then we quickly saw us kind of sit back in and just be defensive again. And I mean, our back four again was superb. Holgate, Keane, been so impressed with him. And we do show that fantastic resilience. But I mean, Vardy in particular, I mean, he hardly touches the ball. They can't get him involved. You know, teams just aren't allowing them to play any sort of way. I mean, it did change massively when Maddison and Iheanacho came on. I thought Maddison was brilliant. For kind of the first time I've really thought he's a top player. Completely changed the game for them. And we were lucky. It was almost, we were just waiting to concede at vast periods of the second half. And, you know, they don't have that other option. You're watching them and you don't really know what their plan is. You know, with Everton, you can see we're sitting back. We're going to try and get it up to Calvert-Lewin, who was superb in holding up, winning fouls, just being a nuisance for Evans and what's his face? Yeah. But but you're watching Leicester and you just
the wrong team.
Yeah. You're watching Leicester and you don't know what it is that they're trying to do anymore, because they haven't got that option of getting Vardy in behind. And he is generally just not touching the ball for 10, 15-minute periods of the game as they're trying to work it side to side. They're trying to, you know, they have good possession, obviously, because any team that plays against Everton does. They just had no ideas. And I mean, you're absolutely right. I don't know where it stops with them. And I just think that now you're seeing Man United and Chelsea play the way that they are. I do think that they're just going to probably end up falling out of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just to say, obviously, it was Soyuncu playing at the back for Leicester.
Sure, that was it.
Important for clarification's sake. But yeah, you're right. Even if Chelsea do lose a game, their inconsistency doesn't seem to be as bad as Leicester's, because Leicester's isn't. It's just genuine and poor form. And I don't think either of us could tell you categorically when we feel like it's going to stop, because it's one of those things where, you'd think, oh, they're playing against a really weak team, but quote me if I'm wrong here, but I think Norwich have taken 4 points off them this season. So there's obviously no easy team in the league for them. Wow. But just for you, I think I've asked you this before, but as we're seeing more and more of Ancelotti in a style that is akin to Rafa Benitez, very defensive, very pragmatic, but gets results. So how is it now? Are we still happy with the fact that you are getting wins and draws on the board, or is it becoming a bit stultifying?
I mean, you can't argue with it. He's getting results, and that's what it's based on. It's not the best thing to watch in the world, and it's nail-biting and nerve-wracking, because, I mean, you're 2-0 up or 2-1 up, and you're going 5 at the back, and, you're not looking at, it's not positive substitutions, but it works, and I mean, if we end up now, massive game on Monday night, if we win that, you really back us to look into getting the Europa League. And I mean, if we get that, then you can't argue one bit. I mean, even if we end up missing out by one place, I think what he can build on from where we were 6 months ago, going into next season with a couple of signings, I mean, you can't argue with it. But it is sometimes nullifyingly boring to watch. I mean, that's just how it is.
That's what you want as a fan, isn't it?
I know it's not what you want to see, I suppose, and it's not free-flowing football, which we have seen with Everton before, where we're very attacking and we're playing some nice stuff, but it is very, very much now we're going to sit back, you can have the ball, and we're going to hit you on the counter-attack, and it works. So what can I say, really? Who am I to say otherwise?
No, exactly that. But that's, as we've already said, that's the important thing, just to see out the rest of the season. And then, we obviously didn't sign anyone in January, so hopefully reassess that at the end of the season. But, I was happy with this kind of midweek game week, just purely for the fact that we wondered whether now, because kind of everyone had played twice, we were going to see some more open games. And I think every single game had over 2.5 goals in it, really, since the Monday night, from Tuesday onwards. So we're beginning to see what I'd say we're more accustomed to seeing from the Premier League. There's certainly been a lot more better performances. And we're also seeing some teams that are a bit relaxed because they've either stayed up or kind of achieved what they want to achieve already this season. That's certainly
the case with Newcastle.
Hey?
Did you think that was the case with Newcastle then?
Oh, 100%. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I think Steve Bruce, I was obviously talking earlier about Pep Guardiola kind of changing things tactically, but whoever decided that at Man City had obviously left the pencil and the notepad around, and Steve Bruce had got hold of it because he played identical formation against Bournemouth, worryingly so, apart from our Kevin De Bruyne was Sean Longstaff for about 30 minutes until he went off injured, but he had already scored a goal in that period. A stat came up during the game. However many games Newcastle played with and without St Maximin this season, we've won, I think, 13 or something with him. It's probably not as high. I think it was about 9 actually. And we've we've won only 1 without him. So it kind of just shows just how important he was.
Yeah.
He came on the hour mark, and obviously the damage had already been done. I think we still scored another goal after that. But it was just a case of, some very relaxed players able to go out there with, no worries whatsoever, which is testimony to Bruce, because he could have maybe been a bit pragmatic and said, although you're on 39 points, you never know, it's bloody blah. And he didn't, and he let them go out there. And he didn't. Sometimes it normally happens when Bentaleb plays, because he can really develop this kind of like footballing side. Hayden obviously breaks up the play quite a lot. I don't particularly rate Bentaleb, but he does try and play football, and it encourages Shelby to do that too. And we can be a lovely footballing side when we want to be. But this is all compounded by Bournemouth. I was on my way back from work, and through intermittent signal, just about managed to get a bit of Eddie Howe's pre-match little press conference they do on the side of the pitch. And the report was like, you've gone with a really attacking lineup today as a plan to try and score lots of goals. And he laughed, but not like a surly Eddie Howe that you sometimes see. He was genuinely like, yeah, that's the idea. I looked at the team again. He had Dom Solanke up front. And then the stat comes up, has not scored in 36 appearances. I'm like, right, okay. I knew it was bad, didn't know it was quite that bad. And Dan Juma played left wing, and I'm pretty sure before lockdown he had an afro and came back with some shaped haircut. And I was like, right, okay, I think that's still the same player. And I would be excused for not knowing who he is. And, I kind of have some recollection, because he hadn't started a game since December. I understand that David Brooks was back, and that was obviously a plus point for them. And Josh King was playing behind the striker. But it's hardly the thing to be happy about on Callum Wilson, who has been the main problem really when the crux of this season comes out, because he and David Brooks have been injured for a lot of it, and then Wilson has played. He's been completely out of form. But that's been the most important thing for Bournemouth. They do have quite a small squad, and when they're not firing, as they haven't really been all season, the squad becomes wafer thin. And watching them, Newcastle are a bang average Premier League side. And, if Isaac Hayden doesn't, for some reason, lean back and sky the ball after Lazaro hit the bar, it should be 5-0. And I know they've ended up scoring, which is, the most pointless of pointless goals, because it just infuriates me. It probably infuriates them, because we finally scored. But they were genuinely terrible. And if they stay up from that position, it will be a miracle.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't think they will. And I do very much worry for the ramifications for them, in terms of we've seen what happened with Sunderland. And I worry, maybe, do you think that it could end up going in the same direction? I mean, considering the money they have spent.
Oh, 100%. I think it could happen for all of the sides apart from Norwich. I think they're the only team that are sorted financially purely because they haven't spent any money since they've come up.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that would probably be the worrying thing. And I mean, Dom Solanke, I don't think he's a Premier League striker right now. I think probably doing good to play in the Championship. Obviously, there's a lot of links with Fraser, Eddie Howe, obviously. I mean, I think he should have jumped ship a year or two ago. I think we've mentioned this before. And you do worry at what state they will be in come the beginning of a Championship season, if that's where they were to end up, which is likely. And you do worry.
No, you have to worry. I just think the whole core of the club is just a bit broken at the moment, because all the good stuff that they did to get in the position that they have done has obviously all been undone over the last couple of years. But that's what happens, because you end up finishing 10th, and probably a bit higher they ended up doing in the Premier League, and it's very hard to maintain those levels. And you're right, you've got to fear for them because of the way that the club is structured. You know, you're certainly not going to be getting too much money through gate receipts anymore. So it would be a club that heavily relies on TV money. You never want to be going down, especially in the circumstances that we're in at the moment. But I mean, that's a lovely way to end this.
No, thank you again for listening, and obviously we appreciate all the support. And if you haven't already checked out the Twitter, then do so, as that's where we'll be putting out everything. And hopefully you enjoyed the interview as well. It's just been nice to get some different voices and opinions from other fans.
Certainly, and that's certainly the aim going forward. So we will leave you now with the interview that we've done with Steve from the Tap In Football podcast. Obviously recorded it a little bit earlier on, but we wanted to really focus on Manchester United with all that's going on at the club at the moment. And we will be back on either Monday or Tuesday morning. I'm not quite sure which one it will be.
Peace.
You might as well. Well, I'm delighted to say that we're joined by Steve from the Tap In Football podcast. How you doing? You well?
Yeah, I'm really good, mate. Had a bit of a struggle trying to get on here, but we've made it better late than never.
It's all right. No one needs to know about that. It's fine.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, look, no problem whatsoever. I mean, you are a Manchester United fan, and we want to get stuck into them. In our last episode, we focused on Leicester a little bit. And obviously the struggles that they've been having. They went and obviously lost against Lucas's Everton side. Yeah. So, I mean, but the team that really benefits is Manchester United. And I think, after I thought it was a really difficult first half in the first game back against Spurs. But ever since then, I think you've just looked like a completely different side. I mean, you must be buzzing with how it's going right now.
Mate, I was saying to one of my mates in the group chat, it's the happiest I've been since 2013. We finally managed to string together a couple of decent results. I'm not getting ahead of myself too much because I think this season, I don't think we've won 3 consecutive Premier League games. But what's made me happiest is actually the performances. And since obviously we've had Pogba and Fernandes in the team, it's just been a complete turnaround in terms of the style of football we're playing. And for once, I think our Achilles heel for pretty much the last 7 years has been trying to beat teams with a low block. And against Sheffield United, we kind of swept them away. And again, in the previous fixture as well. So yeah, man, it's good times right now. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but yeah, the round of results yesterday just brightened up my day, man.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that actually, because you are actually unbeaten in 15 games or so, I think.
Yeah.
So, you're talking about this run of form, and obviously Solskjaer's come under a lot of criticism over the course of the season. What are your opinions on him? Do you think that that's kind of been just that criticism he's received, or has his opinion kind of been changed?
Do you know what? In the immediate aftermath after some of the games this season, I've been calling for his head. But when I've been a bit more balanced and taken stock, I'm not going to say I think he's going to be our manager for the long term, because I still think jury's out. But what I do think is that, and what I've always kind of thought, is that he needed to be given the proper chance and opportunity to, one, kind of make the team his own, and then 2, have the entire squad at his disposal. And I think if you told United fans at the start of the season that we'd be, in the last 6 games, and obviously given our remaining fixture list, it looks pretty favourable compared to the others, that we'd be in with a chance of getting the top 4, I would have taken it, especially with how we went into the summer transfer window. So I think this season, Solskjaer's been pretty handicapped because we've had De Gea, who was one of our best players. I think he's conceded or made the most errors as a goalkeeper leading to goals this season. We've had Pogba, who's arguably our most talented player, injured for most of the season. We've had Martial, who's technically was our only number 9 until Igalo came, injured for 2 months. And then we had Rashford, who was on hot form, injured again for another considerable chunk of of the season. So I think I looked at our lineup against Newcastle, and it was so threadbare. And I just thought that he's actually done a pretty reasonable job to keep us in and around fourth spot this season. Although I do think we've had some mitigating circumstances in that Spurs have been poorer than we would have expected them to be, and then Chelsea obviously have been equally as inconsistent. So I think perhaps in a more regular season or last season we'd probably be a bit further away. But I think overall I'm pretty happy with what Ole's done, and I think now you've seen everyone come, everyone's fit and firing again. I think we're seeing probably the best management we've seen from his time at the club.
I think I 100% agree. And it's been very interesting to watch you this season because, as you rightfully say, they haven't won 3 games in consecutive fixtures. But you'd like to think with Bournemouth at home this weekend that you may finally do that. I mean, it's almost become, right at the moment, a little kind of mini league where it comes to the top 4, where you've got Leicester on 55, Chelsea on 54, and then you and Wolves back on 52 in 5th and 6th position in the league. I mean, Arsenal are on 46. I'd be very surprised if they obviously ended up making it into the Champions League places. But for me, I mean, I've been very impressed, to be fair to Solskjaer, that he has sorted out this defensive problem. And obviously, I know it was kind of highlighted by Roy Keane in the Spurs game, the defensive frailties that you do have. But that comes because he's been so annoyed with what he's seen over a considerable amount of time, with players like Shaw, obviously De Gea, and to a lesser extent, Maguire making these mistakes. But now that's been a bit more settled and it's improved. I've actually been more intrigued by the fact that Mason Greenwood has begun to be a bit of a, not a shining light, because obviously you've got better players than him who are more experienced and are playing better than him. But I've always kind of thought that, you know, Dan James, although he started the season really well, isn't quite there for, you know, a team that are going to be finishing in the top 4. And I'd like to speak to you just about Greenwood in himself, and obviously playing on that right wing against Brighton. I was really genuinely impressed with him. And I'll be honest, he's kind of a player that sometimes I forget about, not because he's not good enough, but kind of because of his age. And you constantly, you know, we'll get on to Sancho, I'm sure, in a minute with the, you know, the links that have been happening there and what the club have said about him. But I'm just wondering what you think about Greenwood and whether he could literally be your right winger going forward for, you know, 10 or so years.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the defence there, and I just wanted to touch on that before I get to Greenwood. I think we've definitely conceded less goals defensively, but I think it's one of those situations where I think it was Mourinho's first season where De Gea was absolutely unbelievable and we conceded very few goals that season. But if you actually looked at our defence, when we came up against top quality sides, we're quite shaky. And I just get the sense that our current defensive structure, although we're not leaking that many goals, I think we defend better as a unit. I still think individually a lot of those players can be got at. I'm still not entirely convinced by Lindelof and Maguire at 80 million. I'm just it infuriates me because he's so slow and his turn of pace. I think because of his lack of pace, sometimes he overcompensates by trying to go in for challenges which are high risk because he knows he's going to get done for pace. And there's so many games where I just see him just launch in and fly in for a tackle and he just gets done. Or someone just sprints into some space and he gets done again. I personally am not impressed by him. But what he does give us is a bit more aerial presence and I guess a bit more composure on the ball. But I'm still not convinced by that defense. But it's better. But on Greenwood, I genuinely think he's got the potential and talent to go to the top. I personally think I see a higher ceiling for him than I see for Rashford. And I think for me, Greenwood, even though he's I think his actual position's the number 9. I think he has the skill set to play anywhere across the front line. And what I really like from him is technically he's so astute. And he's one of those players where, and I see that in the modern game now, where you don't have to be that sort of fancy with skills. You just have get a yard of space and he'll bury you. And he seems to love that sort of step over, get a yard of space and bury it. And he's been likened to Van Persie with his left foot, but he's also got an equally strong right foot. And one of the things that really impressed me was if you saw our third goal against Brighton, the delivery that he gave to Fernandez, right on the money. And he did it so like almost lazily. And I just had I had no concerns as he was running with the ball when he came onto it that he'd actually deliver the ball. So I think what he's got in his locker is a lot of sort of technical skills, which I think is going to help him a lot. I think he's got the most goals in the Premier League for an 18-year-old or teenager since Wayne Rooney. So it kind of bodes well for him. But what I would say is that I think we definitely need to improve our right side of the pitch, because if you look at our bench now, we don't really have anyone who can come off the bench and really sort of strike any fear. And Greenwood's only 18, so he's going to go through periods where he's sort of inconsistent. But yeah, so far I've been really encouraged by him. And I think prior to the break as well, what that's allowed him to do is I think he gained 3 kilograms of muscle, and he was a bit lightweight prior to the break, but it's allowed him to put on a bit more muscle, and hopefully he'll be a bit more robust in the demands of the Premier League.
Yeah, nice. And I mean, I think I do just want to touch it because, I mean, me and Ollie have both been singing the praises of Pogba and Bruno Fernandes and how exciting it was going to be when they did finally come back and play together. And we really have seen what they can both do. How exciting is that as a fan to be able to know that's your midfield?
Yes, it's amazing. We've been trying to sort out this midfield problem since Scholes retired. So it's been over a decade. We've gone through so many players: Schneiderlin, Fred. I can go on through this. Yeah, exactly. And it's been crazy. And I think the thing with Fernandes is that what I really like about him is that he's always looking for the forward pass. And if you sort of see his pass completion rates, and I think even at Sporting Lisbon, they were quite low, but he's always going for the risky pass, and he's always trying to break lines, which I really like, and it's allowed a different dynamic to our midfield as well, because it means that Pogba is not the only one carrying the burden. And so I think between the two of them sharing the load, and then obviously Matic has just had a crazy resurgence as well. I think it's a really, really good midfield trio pairing. So yeah, I'm really happy with it. I feel kind of sorry for Fred and McTominay because they were doing a decent job. But yeah, these two are just blowing them out of the water at the minute, and they're proper world-class talents.
That's the thing you need, though, isn't it? Because you're right. Although they've kind of taken a back seat at the moment, but that's what you need to be Man United, to be the best team in the league. You need strength in depth, and to be fair to Fred, after a really difficult start, I think he's shown that there is a player there, and he was playing particularly well, especially before the break. But obviously, you've said that United want to improve the right hand side. They need to, and I've obviously mentioned Jadon Sancho already. I was very surprised by what came out earlier on this week about how United aren't willing to pay more than £50 million, because I've seen conflicting reports on, the idea behind that, because a European football expert called Kev Hatchard, I follow him on Twitter, and he was like, look, if they're trying to do that to try and bargain down the price or worry Dortmund, he was like, that is not going to work. This guy's got 2 years left on his deal. Although, yes, he wants to leave, they're not going to be short suitors. So my question to you is obviously, firstly, Jadon Sancho, how well do you think he would fit in at Manchester United? And secondly, although you said that they need to improve the right and Sancho can play there, I quite like the way Martial, Greenwood, and obviously Rashford can kind of interchange up front. So do you kind of see that if Sancho was to join, that he'd almost be able to join in with that as well?
Yeah, Sancho, unbelievable talent. And I think that it comes along very rarely where there's a player who can sort of beat people with ease. And I think when you've got match winners out there like Sancho, you've actually just got to go out and get them. And I think in United's case, he kind of fits the profile. He's young. He's obviously lived in Manchester for a period of his life. He's absolutely flying at Dortmund. He must have some sort of relationship with Rashford, having played with him for England. And he doesn't look fazed by the big occasion. And he seems to me like he's got the right sort of persona and mindset. Obviously, he's backed himself to go out to Dortmund at such a young age, and he's gone there and he's been absolutely smashing it. He's not been fazed. So I'd love to see United go out for Sancho. If we could only buy one player this transfer window, I'd love to see us buy Sancho. I don't know what to make of the reports. The Sky News, I feel like with every passing year, like I don't know who their sources are anymore. I feel like they're just going on Twitter and literally picking off anything they can find.
I'm pretty sure they do that.
Yeah, honestly, it's getting ridiculous now, and it's quote unquote Sky Sports sources. So I think when it comes from maybe a reputable Sky Sports source, like I think Carvajal is pretty on the money at times. And I've forgotten the guy in Italy. I forgot his name. But when there's a reputable source, then I'm more inclined to believe Sky Sports. Otherwise, I mean, even if the reports are true, it could be like United officials trying to spin stories into the media. Because I think most sensible people would agree that Dortmund aren't going to let their prized asset go for 50 million. But I thought it was interesting today because Hakimi, obviously the fullback who was playing, or wingback who was playing at Dortmund, has signed for Inter, and he was at Dortmund for 2 years on loan. Yeah. And he was an instrumental part of the team. So I've heard some stories about Dortmund's finances, and I don't know how true it is, but I think it might be quite telling that obviously one of the players who they might have gone in for hasn't signed for them. So I thought that was an interesting one. But yeah, I still don't see them letting Sancho go on the cheap. But yeah, he's a world-class talent, man. So we need to do everything we can to try and get him.
Yeah, I think probably just quickly to finish up on that, I think it was obviously a really good move going to Germany. And I think that the pressure that a young talent, especially being English, it carries is such a difficult thing we've seen it over the years with so many players where they just haven't been able to kind of live up to anything that people hype it up to be. And I think, do you reckon he's now at that age where he can come back and maybe that pressure's less, or maybe he'll be able to deal with it better? Which angle do you think it is probably more?
I think there's a different level of scrutiny when you come to United. Obviously, we've had a number of people trying to fill in like that number 7 spot for a number of years, and no one's quite made it. And like Depay was a player we went in for who was doing fantastically at I think was it Feyenoord he came from? I think so. And then he came in, didn't quite cut the mustard. We had Zaha, who again is another top quality player, who came in perhaps a bit too early in his career for him again. Didn't quite cut the mustard, but those are like 2 players who've obviously gone on and shown that they're actually really talented. I think with Sancho, though, I think he just seems a cut above the rest. And I still think he's got a bit of learning to do. And I still think there's a jump in quality between Dortmund and United. And I think obviously, I see some of the defenses in the Bundesliga, and I just think sometimes like you wouldn't get such, I don't want to say pants defending over here, but
yeah, I know.
They're afforded a lot of time and space at times. And I don't think he would have the same luxuries at United, but I think he's got the capability and just the skill set to really come to United and be a success, and the self-belief, because I think there's a lot of talented players out there, but a lot of it comes down to mentality when you're really trying to be like a top draw player. And I think he really believes in himself. So yeah, definitely, I think he'd be good fit.
He would certainly, and to be honest, just to round it off, I mean, it feels like for once, and it's been a long time since we can say it, but it feels like a genuinely positive time to be a Manchester United fan. Me and Lucas have spoke at length already that obviously this season's been wrapped up, but next season for us just looks like it could be really open, like a genuine title race. And I feel as fans, it's kind of what we've been looking out for so long. Yeah. for me, I think it's going to be pretty crucial for Manchester United to be involved in that you're in the Champions League. I don't know why, but it's one of these things in football that if you are in the Europa League, it just seems to derail anyone's attempts at trying to win the league. That Thursday night, just that Thursday, Sunday.
Man. It's a killer.
Exactly. But for you to be in the Champions League next year, you're going to have to pretty much win, well, not every game from now until the end of the season, because obviously we don't know what's happening in Manchester City's ban. I'm sure we're going to find out about very soon. And Leicester's form would suggest that he'd probably overtake them. But you do play Leicester on the final day of the season. But before that, it's a ton of pretty straightforward games that you'd fancy Manchester United to win. With your United hat firmly on here, do you think you'll finish in the top 4 this season?
Man, I've been the most pessimistic United fan all season. Like, I've changed my dynamic. It's taken me a number of years to finally realize that we're not what we were. And I think if we hadn't made the Fernandes signing or we didn't have Pogba back, I'd say I wouldn't back us. But looking at our run of fixtures, I mean, Bournemouth are distracting themselves. Villa are pretty poor at the minute. I'd expect us to beat West Ham and Southampton, and I'd expect us to beat Palace as well. And I'd like to think the way the fixtures are going, I mean, Leicester have absolutely imploded. I'd like to think the way the fixtures are going, we might even be in a chance with getting third spot on the last day. But yeah, I just think I look at us now, and I can see goals coming from Martial, coming from Rashford, Greenwood, Pogba, and Fernandes. And I think there you've got like 5 pretty quality players. I mean, even since the restart, Rashford's been pretty poor, and we haven't seen him fit and firing again. So I just think with those players, we certainly have enough to beat the teams that we're coming up against. And hopefully we'll have enough to beat Leicester as well on the final day. So yeah, I'd back us to get into the Champions League. And then, I mean, everyone's forgetting as well that we also have the Europa League to play for as well. So that could be
a strange little tournament.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I need us to be playing on Wednesday again, man. It's horrific being in the Europa League. So yeah, fingers crossed, man. I'm really hoping we make it. But I think we will. I'm quietly confident.
Well, as do I. I think you will make it. I think at the moment, it'll be you and Chelsea. I think Leicester will probably end up dropping out, but they've still had a fantastic season. But, you know, this changes all the time. I'm sure someone will end up slipping up somewhere. But that is literally the beauty of the Premier League. But, Steve, thank you ever so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Just for everyone that's listening or watching to this, that is Tap In Football Podcast. Make sure you check the guys out. They've had Lucas on before, and it's some really good stuff. Get some excellent guests as well, which I think that, you know, we might have to take homage to you in that one and try and take a leaf out of your book. But genuinely, Steve, thank you ever so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much, guys. It's been my pleasure.
Lovely. Cheers, mate. Thank you very much.
Yeah, cheers. Appreciate it. Sorry about that.